Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. I had just finished my third cup of coffee when I saw the calendar alert blink. Cameron's last day before vacation. My stomach tightened, not from caffeine, but from what I knew was coming. Cameron Halden, founder and CEO of Halden Dynamics, was finally taking a break after 15 years of non-stop work, and no one deserved it more. He'd built this tech empire from a cluttered garage in Evanston into one of the most influential infrastructure firms in the country. And I'd been at his side for over a decade, rising from junior analyst to chief strategy officer, a role I carved out with every late-night deck and salvaged client pitch. The office buzzed with the kind of excitement usually reserved for IPO announcements or surprise bonuses. But I knew better. Today didn't feel like relief. It felt like a transfer of power. Because with Cameron stepping away, even if just for a month, someone had to hold the reins. And unfortunately, that someone was his son, Liam Halden. The name alone made my left eye twitch. He'd only just graduated from Wharton 2 years ago, barely had a grip on supply chain optimization, let alone our intricate client retention systems. Yet here he was, walking into our tower on Michigan Avenue in designer shoes, a cocky grin, and not a clue about the machinery humming behind the glass walls. Cameron had briefed me the week prior. "Ease him in, Susie," he said, squeezing my shoulder like I was his trusted lieutenant. "He'll be shadowing you mostly. Let him learn the ropes. Don't throw him into the fire." I nodded then, but I was already preparing for the burn. Liam wasn't just green, he was entitled. The kind who corrected senior managers mid-meeting and thought synergy meant cutting departments that didn't praise his latest memo. So when he strolled into my office that morning, wearing sunglasses inside and sipping a $9 smoothie, I steeled myself. "Hey, Suze," he said, like we were old buddies. "Ready to show me how the empire runs?" I kept my tone professional. "It's Susan. And yes, we've got a full schedule. Morning overview with client strategy, then a review of the international accounts." He plopped onto the guest chair like it was a beanbag. "I was thinking we skip all that. I read the Q3 brief on the plane. Got the gist." I blinked. "The gist?" "I'm sure you did," I said, biting down a dozen sharper responses. "But the nuances are where we win or lose." He grinned, stretching his legs out in front of him. "Look, I know you're worried I'll mess things up. Everyone is. But relax. I've got instincts. You'll see." And that's when I realized this wouldn't just be difficult. This would be war, waged in espresso meetings and buried memos. A slow battle between experience and ego. The only problem? His last name gave him a kind of armor I'd never had. I had to earn every bit of respect in this building. Liam? He'd inherited it like cufflinks. I walked him through the week's projections anyway, careful, measured. He yawned halfway through and changed the subject to market disruption opportunities. The man didn't know our clients. He didn't even know our CRM login. But Cameron had asked me to help him, so I would. Even if it meant keeping one hand on the fire alarm. Because something told me Liam Halden wasn't just here to learn. He was here to prove something. And he might just burn the whole place down trying. I arrived at the office that Monday morning with my usual rhythm. Triple shot espresso in one hand, tablet in the other, already scanning the status of our European deliverables. The building was quiet, dignified, humming with the subtle energy of a company that thrived on precision and discretion. So when I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor and heard laughter, loud, unfiltered, college party laughter, I knew something was off. "Yo, Suze, you're gonna love this!" Liam's voice echoed from my office. My office. I quickened my pace, heels sharp against the marble tiles. When I reached the glass door, I paused for a full breath before pushing it open. Liam was leaning against my desk like he owned the wood it was carved from, and next to him was a stranger. Late 20s, all gelled hair and shiny loafers. He had a gaming laptop open, feet propped up on my guest chair. "Meet Chase," Liam said with a grin. "He's joining us for a bit. My dad's cool with it." I blinked. "He's what?" "Cool with it," Liam repeated. "I told him last week. Chase has this amazing algorithm idea, and I figured, why not tap into that while I'm here?" Chase gave me a wink that made me want to accidentally on purpose spill coffee on his keyboard. "Sup, Susie. Liam tells me you're the real boss around here." I didn't smile. "It's Susan, and this is a secure floor. We don't allow unauthorized personnel in client data zones." Liam waved me off like I was scolding a child for spilling juice. "Relax, he signed an NDA. Dad knows, it's temporary. Temporary, like a bad rash." I wanted to call Cameron that instant, but something in Liam's expression stopped me. It was the smugness, yes, but underneath it was certainty. He really believed he had permission. And if that was true, Cameron must have been seriously misled. Chase stayed. He didn't just stay. He nested. Within a day, he had a badge, a desk in the corner suite, and was looping himself into high-level meetings he had no business attending. I even caught him adjusting a forecast sheet for our fintech expansion, a document that was weeks from final sign-off. When I confronted Liam, he leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "He's a genius. I trust him. We're moving fast, Susan. That's the vibe. We can't keep playing by old rules." Old rules. He meant the ones that kept our billion-dollar clients from suing us into oblivion. The worst part? They weren't just playing. They were planning. Whispered meetings in the break room. Late-night sessions in the boardroom with the blinds drawn. "New strategies," they said. "Aggressive growth tactics." And people were listening. Young interns started quoting Chase's buzzwords. Mid-level managers were suddenly inviting Liam to lunch. There was momentum building, dangerous, misguided momentum, and it was all happening under my nose. The more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't some casual internship gone sideways. This was a takeover in slow motion, and everyone was too distracted or too afraid to see it. That night, I stayed long after the floor had emptied, staring out over the city from my corner window. Below, the river glistened like steel in moonlight. I tapped Cameron's contact on my phone but didn't press call. Not yet, because I needed proof. They were making moves, and I had a sinking feeling they weren't just here to learn. They were here to rewrite the future and erase me from it. By Thursday morning, the office was practically humming with unspoken questions. 2 junior associates had approached me separately with confused expressions, whispering about a new, internal startup Liam and Chase were supposedly piloting. No one had official memos. No one had timelines. But somehow, everyone had heard. I couldn't wait any longer. At 7:14 a.m., before the workday even began, I called Cameron. To my surprise, he answered on the first ring. The background was quiet. No Santorini waves, no clinking glasses. Just his voice, warm, worn, and still sharp despite the vacation. "Susie," he said, and I swear the sound of my name said properly almost made me sigh in relief. "What's going on?" I didn't ease into it. "Cameron, your son has brought an outsider into the company, Chase Donovan. He's using your office, touching confidential data, and directing internal staff like he's on payroll, all under Liam's authority." A pause. Then, "Chase is harmless. They're experimenting, trying to build something. Liam's got ideas. It's part of growing up." I blinked, stunned. "This isn't a lemonade stand. They're accessing proprietary systems. They've got interns rewriting code segments. They're meddling with financial sheets. I caught Chase in our server dashboard yesterday." He chuckled softly. Chuckled. "They're young, Susie. Let them mess up a little. It's how I learned. How you learn too, I imagine. You've got a good head. Just guide them." "I'm trying," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. "But they're not asking for guidance. They're bypassing protocol. Then give them space to fall. Liam needs to understand risk, and he won't if we handhold him every second. Besides, he told me you two were working great together." I closed my eyes. "He told you what?" "Cameron, with all due respect, this isn't just trial and error. I think they're up to something. Something beyond just learning the ropes." The silence on the other end stretched just a bit too long. Then his tone changed, firm, fatherly, distant. "They're kids, brilliant in their own way. Let them explore. You're strong enough to hold the fort while they find their footing." Strong enough to hold the fort. Not right, not trusted. Just strong enough to clean up after them. I ended the call soon after, promising to keep him updated. But when I hung up, My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from that creeping, nauseating certainty. Cameron wasn't coming to help. Not yet. And while he was sipping wine in some whitewashed villa, his son and Chase were already rewriting lines of code and drafting emails to internal partners, without oversight. Later that afternoon, I intercepted a message intended for Liam, but mistakenly sent to my inbox. It referenced Series A investors, rapid share conversion, and a meeting with a shell company I didn't recognize. My heart sank. They weren't just experimenting. They were positioning, playing entrepreneur inside a multi-billion-dollar company, using Halden Dynamics as their playground, and maybe worse, their launchpad. The worst part? Cameron was giving them cover. I sat in my office long after sunset, lights off, watching their private conference room flicker with movement across the hall. Liam was pacing. Chase was grinning. There were documents spread out over the table. They were planning something big, and if no one stopped them soon, the damage wouldn't be just internal. It would be irreversible. It started with a ping, a soft, unassuming notification that flashed across my screen just after 10 a.m., a flagged transaction request from our internal compliance system. It wasn't unusual in itself. I dealt with flagged items daily. What was unusual was the figure attached to it. $100 million, preliminary asset divestment inquiry. My fingers froze above the keyboard. I blinked, reread the amount, then scanned the attached document. It wasn't a routine adjustment. It was a sell order, preparation to liquidate $100 million worth of company shares, quietly bundled into a staggered private placement. And the name on the authorization line? Liam Halden. My pulse slammed into my ears. I stood so fast my chair screeched against the tile. I grabbed the report, printed the key pages, and headed straight for the executive boardroom where Liam had been camping out all week with Chase. The hallway was quiet, eerily so, like the office was holding its breath. I opened the glass door without knocking. Liam was lounging at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up like a startup mogul, while Chase flipped through a thick investor packet. They looked up, half smirking, not even startled. "Morning, Susan," Liam drawled. "Come to see the future?" I dropped the report on the table. The room went silent. "You're attempting to liquidate $100 million in company shares," I said, voice cold, controlled. "Without board approval, without your father's signature, this is reckless and illegal." Liam glanced at the packet, then leaned back with the confidence of someone who thought consequences were for other people. "It's not illegal," he said. "We're simply reallocating assets into a more aggressive portfolio. Nexus Capital is interested, and we need to move before the market adjusts." "Nexus is a vulture firm," I snapped. "They strip and flip companies like ours. You're gutting your father's legacy to impress Chase and God knows who else. Cameron would never approve this." Liam's face changed. Gone was the smirk. In its place, something sharper, petty, threatened. "You think you can forbid me?" he spat, standing abruptly. "How dare you?" I didn't flinch. "I'm trying to protect this company from your ignorance." And then it happened. His face flushed, his hands clenched into fists, and he shouted, loud enough to shake the glass. "How dare you forbid me to do anything? You're just one of my father's slaves. You're fired!" The words echoed, stunning in their volume and viciousness. Behind me, I heard gasps from the outer hallway. A few heads turned, frozen in place. I stood completely still. "You don't have the authority to fire me," I said quietly. Liam stepped closer, eyes wild. "I do now. I've been acting CEO since he left. He signed the paperwork." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He wasn't bluffing. Cameron had given him interim power. I stared at Liam for a long moment, not out of fear, but out of heartbreak, because I realized then, this wasn't just a mistake. This was betrayal. "You've just destroyed everything your father built," I said, "and you don't even know it." Security arrived moments later, confused, apologetic. They escorted me out of the executive floor like I was some disgraced intruder. I didn't argue, because I knew the real storm hadn't even begun. Not yet. But it would. And when it did, Liam Halden wouldn't just be embarrassed, he'd be exposed. I stood in the lobby of Halden Dynamics, badge in hand, security shadowing me like I was some disgruntled ex-employee instead of the woman who had saved this company more times than anyone could count. The front desk receptionist, Lily, looked like she might cry. She glanced up from her monitor as I passed. "Miss Susie, wait, is this for real?" I gave her a small smile. "Looks like it." It was humiliating, yes. But more than that, it was infuriating. Not the escort, not the stunned looks from interns, not even the fact that no one in the boardroom came running to stop it. No, what truly made my blood boil was the realization that I had given everything to this company. Every late night, every canceled vacation, every time I covered for some VP's incompetence. And now I was being shown the door by a rich, arrogant child who probably still needed help filing his own taxes. I rode the elevator down, alone, fists clenched tight around my resignation letter. No, they hadn't asked for one, but I was going to give it anyway, on my terms. I stopped just outside HR and dropped the envelope on Monica's desk. "Effective immediately," I said simply. She looked up, stunned. "Susie, this isn't— Wait, let's talk about— There's nothing left to talk about." I smiled faintly. I carried this company for 10 years, and now I'm done being the scaffolding while other people pretend to know what they're doing. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers and looked at the single line typed above my signature. You don't get to build an empire on someone else's backbone, then act like they never mattered. I walked out of Halden Dynamics that morning without ceremony, no tears, no drama. I just left, because that's what you do when you've outgrown a place that refuses to recognize your worth. And here's the thing about leaving. You don't slam the door. You just let it swing closed behind you and wait. Because eventually, when the shine fades, when the investors ask questions, when the numbers start dropping and no one knows how to fix it, they'll start to realize. They'll remember who used to stay late to fix what others broke, who never asked for credit, only solutions, who warned them when it mattered. And by the time they come looking for you, you'll be somewhere better, somewhere they never imagined you'd go without them. And you won't be waiting. You'll be building. I returned the next morning, early, before the rest of the office came to life. The building smelled like lemon cleaner and faint regret. I was here for one reason, to pack up my things. A cardboard box in hand, I took the elevator to the 42nd floor one last time. The doors opened to silence. Not the good kind either. The cold, awkward kind that settles in when people know something ugly has happened, but don't dare say it aloud. I walked down the hall like I still belonged there, like I wasn't minutes away from walking out of their lives entirely. My office door was still ajar, just as I'd left it. On the glass, my name was still stenciled in gold. Susan Avery, Chief Strategy Officer, but not for long. I opened my desk drawers, mechanically sorting files, notepads, old client gifts. A small framed photo of the first team I'd led, back when we were building the Southeast rollout from scratch, landed in the bottom of the box. I stared at it for a moment, jaw tight. We had pulled off the impossible that year. We'd saved the company millions. No press release, no bonus. Just a nod from Cameron and another late night at the office. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed. Built more. Fought harder. Carried the weight no one else wanted. And now I was being dismissed by a boy in a blazer who thought spreadsheets were suggestions and legacy was something owed. Speak of the devil. "Cleaning out already?" Liam's voice oozed smug satisfaction. He leaned against the doorway like a villain from a soap opera. "No long goodbye tour?" I didn't answer. I just kept packing. He stepped inside, slow, deliberate. "You know, you were always so intense, like everything had to be perfect. I get it now. You thought this place needed you." I froze, fingers gripping the edge of my desk. "But it doesn't," he continued, "and soon it won't even remember you." I looked up, eyes sharp. "You're destroying this company." He laughed. "I'm elevating it. You couldn't see the opportunity, but I have vision. That Nexus deal? It's just the beginning. I'll double that $100 million in 6 months, maybe even 3. I rose slowly, closing the last box. "Your father trusted me for a reason," I said, my voice low. "I earned my place here. You're coasting on a name you don't understand." Liam stepped closer, eyes gleaming with venom. "You want to talk about names?" he said. Soon, my name will be the one everyone remembers. Not yours, not even my father's, mine. And he'll be proud of me when I make this company bigger than he ever dreamed. For a second, I couldn't speak. Not because I was shocked, but because I suddenly realized Liam wasn't just arrogant. He was dangerous. He truly believed he was saving the company, that gutting it, selling off its bones to people like Nexus, would make him a hero. I picked up my box, stared him down one last time. You don't need my warning, you need a mirror. And I walked out. Through the glass doors, past the people who still avoided eye contact, down to the street where the wind bit against my cheeks like a slap. He thought this was the end, but I was just getting started. And Liam? He was about to learn what it looks like when a company is built on Sandot. My phone buzzed as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring blankly at the half-unpacked box I dumped on the floor the night before. The screen flashed with a name I hadn't seen in days, Cameron Halden. I let it ring twice, long enough to feel the heat rise in my chest. Then I answered. Susie. His voice came through, warm and familiar, like it hadn't been completely absent while everything fell apart. Why aren't you at work? What's going on? I stood and walked slowly to the window, watching the early morning light stretch across the skyline. You really don't know? He was quiet for a beat. No, I assumed things were fine. Liam said you two were collaborating. He said you were helping him transition. I laughed once, hollow and tired. Transition? Is that what he called it? Susie, he said again, but softer now. What happened? Your son, I said carefully, fired me. Silence. Fired you? He repeated, like the words didn't fit together. He doesn't have the authority. You gave it to him, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. You signed over interim control. You gave him the keys and told me to guide him, and he turned around and humiliated me in front of the entire executive floor. Wait, he said, voice now urgent. What did he say? I swallowed hard. He said I was just one of his father's slaves, and that I was fired for trying to stop him from selling $100 million in company shares to a firm that wants to bleed this place dry. Cameron went silent. So silent, I could hear his breath catch. I had no idea, he finally said. Susie, I never intended. God, I didn't know it had gone that far. He told me you were supporting his strategy, that you two were aligned. He lied, I said simply, and you believed him. I'm flying back tomorrow, he said, almost breathless. We're going to fix this. Sit tight. Don't do anything. Please, we'll talk the second I land. But I'd heard that tone before. That panicked scrambling of a man who'd finally realized too late how far the damage had spread. And I was done waiting for men to catch up to the truth I'd been carrying for weeks. No, I said, my voice calm, level. I'm not coming back. Susie, don't say that. We can undo this. You've been with me since the beginning. Yes, and in all that time, I've built your systems, saved your deals, cleaned up after your executives. I've bled for this company while Liam strutted through it like a spoiled prince. I didn't know, he began again, but I cut him off. I'm tired, Cameron. Tired of being invisible until it's convenient. Tired of being the safety net for your son's recklessness. He exhaled hard. Please, just wait until I get there. We'll sit down. We'll talk. But I was already shaking my head. I don't want a conversation. I wanted respect. And that ship sailed the second you gave him my seat at the table. I hung up, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. Cameron Halden returned on a stormy Thursday morning. No press release, no company-wide email. Just the sudden reappearance of the man who had once walked every floor like a general inspecting his troops. He went straight to the 42nd floor. No hellos, no small talk. He barely looked at the assistants scrambling to announce his arrival. The only words he said, loud enough for the entire floor to hear, were, "Where is my son?" An hour later, word spread like wildfire. Something had happened. Something big. By noon, whispers turned into hard facts. Cameron had summoned Liam, Chase, and the entire finance team into the boardroom. The doors were closed for nearly 2 hours. The tension on the executive floor was thick enough to chew through. And then, around 2:30 p.m., it happened. Cameron burst out of the boardroom, face pale with fury, eyes bloodshot with disbelief. Liam followed a few steps behind, no longer smug, no longer swaggering, just blank. Chase? He was already gone. Cameron's voice, usually composed and commanding, cracked through the silence as he spoke to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. He sold our preferred class voting shares, for liquidity, to Nexus. Gasps rippled across the bullpen. Several employees turned to one another, mouths open. A stunned VP dared to ask, "On whose advice?" Cameron spat the name like it was poison. Chase Donovan. He convinced Liam they could accelerate growth by giving Nexus a controlling position without understanding what they were giving away. There it was, the final, brutal truth. The $100 million sale wasn't just reckless, it was catastrophic. They hadn't just liquidated funds, they'd handed significant influence to a firm known for carving up companies and selling the remains. Nexus wasn't interested in growth. They were circling like sharks. By late afternoon, Halden Dynamics stock, already shaky, took a nosedive. Vendors began calling. Clients started canceling meetings. One even pulled out of a multi-million-dollar partnership, citing unstable internal governance. It was unraveling. All of it. And Susie? She wasn't there. But her name was everywhere. She would have stopped this. She warned him. She knew. Cameron sat alone in his office that evening, the blinds drawn. Not even his executive assistant dared knock. He stared at the financial impact summary, hands trembling slightly. $100 million. And with voting shares compromised, Nexus now had a foothold in every major strategic decision. He had built an empire, and left it in the hands of a boy who listened to a snake in designer sneakers. Now, the wolves were at the door, and the only person who could have stopped them had already walked away. I was folding laundry in my tiny apartment, half watching the market news tick by on the muted TV screen when my phone rang again. Cameron Halden. I stared at it, arms still, the familiar pang of bitterness curling in my stomach. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Susie." His voice was quiet, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but please, hear me out." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He filled the silence on his own. I came back and, "It's worse than I thought. You were right about everything. About Liam. About Chase. About the damage." There was a pause. Then a ragged breath. "Nexus has influence now. We're bleeding investor confidence. One of our oldest partners just terminated a $60 million contract. I thought I was giving my son a chance to prove himself, but I gave him a weapon he didn't know how to use." Still, I said nothing. I wanted him to feel the weight of it, the quiet. "I removed him," he said finally. "Effective immediately. Liam has been stripped of all authority, permanently. He won't be returning to the company in any capacity." That got my attention. "He's out?" I asked, voice sharp. "Yes, and I've already hired outside counsel to deal with the Nexus breach, but that's not why I'm calling." I closed my eyes, already knowing what was coming. "I need you, Susie. The company needs you. I'm asking you to come back, not just as Chief Strategy Officer, on your terms. Whatever they are, name your role, your conditions. This time, you lead." It was everything I'd waited to hear for years. Everything I'd earned. The power, the recognition, the ability to steer the company without begging to be heard. But it came too late. "You didn't listen when it mattered," I said quietly. "You handed the company over to a boy who had never worked a day in his life. You ignored my warnings, and now you want me to clean up his mess." "I know," he said, "and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm not asking for that. I'm asking you to help me save what's left of what we built together." I looked around my apartment, the same apartment where I'd worked countless late nights, holding that company together with duct tape and caffeine. I thought about the years I'd given, the sacrifices I'd made, and I thought about what it meant to return now, not as someone crawling back, but as someone walking through the front door with a name they finally respected. "You want me to fix it," I said. "I want you to lead," Cameron replied. I didn't say yes. Not yet. But I didn't hang up either. And that silence? That was power. I didn't rush back. For once in my life, I made them wait. Let the crisis steep. Let the board sweat. Let every department feel the absence of the woman they once saw as background noise, the steady hand they overlooked until the building started to shake. When I finally stepped back into the tower, it wasn't through the employee entrance. I took the executive elevator, alone, silent, no escort needed. The 42nd floor was different now. The energy was heavier, subdued. People looked up as I walked past, eyes wide, uncertain, not with pity, with hope. Cameron met me at the edge of the conference room, shoulders heavier than I remembered. For a moment, he looked like a man who'd finally understood what legacy really meant. "You don't work for me anymore," he said softly. "You work with me, or above me, however you want it." I nodded, and we walked in. The boardroom was packed. Directors, legal advisors, senior execs, most of them pale and cautious. Some ashamed. Some pretending they'd never doubted me. Cameron introduced me as the new chief executive strategist, reporting to no one, holding full power to restructure operations and restore stability. No one objected. Not this time. The first thing I did? I cleaned house. Every yes man who had greenlit Liam's fantasy strategy was placed on leave pending review. I froze the Nexus deal, called in our fiercest compliance team, and personally began rebuilding client relationships that had started to fracture under Liam's short-sighted games. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand applause. I just got to work. But more importantly, I didn't forget. I didn't forget what it felt like to be silenced, dismissed, fired by someone who hadn't earned the right to speak my name. And I made sure the new culture at Halden Dynamics didn't either. Every voice mattered now. Every warning was listened to. Every quiet contributor got the credit they deserved. In my first company-wide address, I stood in front of the entire staff, old faces, new ones, even some who had tried to play neutral while the building burned. "I came back," I said, "not because I was desperate, but because this company was worth saving, not because of its name, but because of its people." And then I paused. There's a lesson here. One I want everyone to remember. Don't ever mistake silence for weakness. Don't confuse humility with submission. And never forget, when someone tries to erase the person holding the foundation together, the whole structure eventually comes down. Heads nodded. Some eyes welled. And this time, no one looked away. Later that evening, I stood by the tall windows overlooking the city, glass in hand. The skyline shimmered with second chances. Behind me, my new office waited. Mine, fully mine. And in my coat pocket was a note I had written to myself the night I walked out. "They'll realize when it's too late." They had. But I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to rebuild. Because leadership isn't about power. It's about knowing exactly when to walk away and exactly when to come back.